Marilyn, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to assume that paranormal phenomena, ESP, is real. There's something real about it. Now, I personally don't subscribe to that quite yet, but I want to assume that it is. I want to know, how could it work? Through what mechanism could it possibly make sense?
Well, at this moment, there's no answer to that question. I think we can sort of begin to speculate and recognize that there are sort of new developments happening in science that could speak to some partial answers to that question. I think about historically the notion that we live in a Newtonian world that is based on a kind of billiard ball causality, you know, and so you have to have A triggering B to lead to C. What we're seeing today is that that's real. I recently went to watch the launch of the space shuttle, and I can testify to the fact that Newtonian physics is alive and well, and it's a good thing. At the same time, what we're discovering is more and more about the quantum aspects of reality, and the notion that rather than this kind of deterministic causality, that there is more about a correlation between parts, even separated at large distance. So how can you, again, build a worldview that allows both the reality of the Newtonian model, of the physicality of it all, with then this kind of probabilistic quantum world? So when I think about psi research, and I think about the kind of psi phenomena we're talking about, phenomena that imply that somehow, you know, our awareness can reach out beyond the brain and describe something in another location. So the question is that a brain activity? Or does that imply that we are more than our physicality? And I think that at this moment, we don't know the answer because it is both about the brain. Our brain is clearly important in our awareness and our perceptions. But if you begin to take this kind of quantum model, it's possible that there's an interconnectedness between separated bodies of information, in this case humans, and that we don't yet know enough to understand how it is that these brains and bodies are interconnected. And so it may be that the data from psi research suggests the non-local nature of our consciousness. It may equally suggest that we are physical and that our physicality is imbued with a bit more flexibility than simply this localized nature of brain activity. So if you took something like a quantum paradigm, and you say two people are interconnected or entangled, as the language goes, and then you look at the ways in which that entanglement could lead to a particular kind of information system. So in other words, how is it that I know what you're feeling from the other side of the planet? Well, perhaps there's a way in which we're an entangled system, so we're not really disconnected, we're really connected. And that there are ways in which through a nonlinear, complex system, a tiny perturbation in my brain, through this kind of quantum interconnectedness, leads to a whole cascade of responses, including cognitive awareness, imagery. I see you brushing your teeth or combing your hair, you know. How is it that I got that level of information and resolution from something that is, you know, so far away? So the data from psi research, I think, is extremely important in this domain.
Look, I think that's interesting. I would immediately have some problems with it. I would have some problems with the use of quantum information, which occurs at so many orders of magnitude smaller than the neuron activities in our brain, and in a hot, wet environment, which would seem to collapse all of the quantum stuff. I think that's one issue. I would also have the issue that some psi phenomena at least claim to be about the future, and it's hard to see how quantum mechanics as we know it today can bring future events other than in the microscopic world, that much macroscopic to us. In listening to you, I would want to maybe pose it this way in terms of categories of explanation. You seem to be talking about an enhanced understanding of the physical world might be an explanation for a psychic phenomenon. And so maybe there are two categories. There's a quantum extension, which you're talking about, and then maybe there's physical things that we have no idea what it is today, but still part of the physical world. There's a whole other category that people talk about, maybe you're not talking about it, but that is that we need to talk about a totally different realm of existence, a non-physical, a spiritual, a mental, I don't know what to call it. Is that a fair way to look at it?
So I would challenge a couple of things you just said. First of all, I think it's been demonstrated at this point that quantum processes operate at the macro level as well as the micro level. I think it's been demonstrated in neurons, so we begin to see that even if the brain is too warm and wet, it still appears that we can have some kind of quantum capacitors within the brain that allow quantum processes to be happening there. So then the second issue that you bring up is that when we think about what is the kind of epistemology of our times, how do we know what we know? I think we're alive at a remarkable time in human history. Never before have so many worldviews, belief systems, ways of engaging reality come into contact. And with those different models of reality come different epistemologies, different ways of accessing truth, as well as different ontologies, different models of what is so. On the one hand, we have these enormous successes of Western science, based as it is in the material, physical dimensions of our experience. And on the other hand, we have a plethora of different models of reality, different truth systems, different ways of, acquiring information that don't at all adhere to the kind of physicalist model that Western science, dictates, demands, really. And so I think the opportunity for living in the 21st century is the synergy that comes when these different truth systems meet. So does that mean ultimately that we're going to need to throw away science, or does it mean that we're going to throw away religion? Or does it mean that as we navigate 21st century life, we begin to develop a new model or a new ontology that holds the partial nature of each of these truth systems, recognizing that in order to really come to a full appreciation of reality, it's going to require a convergence of the differences.
So hypothesize with me, what could be the possible mechanisms, the possible ontologies, the fundamental ways that psi phenomena could work? Is it an extension of the physical world? Is it some new realm, some spiritual world? How do you feel about the different models?
I think that given how extraordinary our time is and how complex it is, that there are going to be various alternative kinds of explanations for how you can have a physicalist model of reality that allows an orbiting space station and all the wonders of aerospace and the technologies that we've invented, with then that deep pursuit of meaning and that sense of who we are that is very subjective, is very qualitative. I think that what is necessary is a convergence of these truth systems in what I'm going to call a meta-ontology. The notion that as we're trying to make sense of all these competing theories and models, perhaps what's going to be necessary to be a robust citizen in the 21st century is a map that allows for paradox, that allows for conflicting sources of data, and that in fact we are the material, physical aspects that can reduce our experience to the brain, and we are this notion of something greater, something vaster, some manifestation of God in its beauty and in its complexity. So how do we build a model of reality that holds that we simply don't know enough to prematurely close the conversation?
But is there anything more than these two possibilities, either our current physical world extended in ways that we don't know, or through quantum mechanics, and then some other realm entirely? Those are two distinct, mutually exclusive ways to explain reality.
Well, are they mutually exclusive? When I look at, in my work on Living Deeply, we've done this 10-year study of transformation and interviewing all these masters from different world traditions and looking at some of the core elements across these traditions, we see that we are the physical, but that there appears to also be a kind of engagement with our metaphysical. And I think that what we may discover in the next 10 to 1,000 years is that we need a model of reality that allows us to hold our physicality with our metaphysicality, that allows us to reduce the nature of our experience to our, physiology in our brains, and also then imbues us with a set of possibilities for our interconnectedness. You look at these different truth systems, you hear these mystics using quantum physics as a justification. You hear quantum physicists talking about the nature of these kind of non-material realities. studies. You hear the physiological psychologists now interfacing with Tibetan monks to try and create a different understanding. I think that the humility that comes in this moment in time is also an opportunity to begin to grapple with the fact that each explanation is partial and incomplete.